Okay, here we go. So this federal law, McKinney-Vento, has a different standard for identifying homeless people than HUD. And that is that homelessness, like you know it, like living out of your car, living in a building that's not occupied by anybody else, the typical things we think of when we think of homelessness. But in addition to that, McKinney-Vento says you are considered homeless if you are living with somebody else or doubled up because of economic hardship. And so we look at that and we say, let's say that you and I have decided to live together. Is it because I don't have the money to live by myself? And do you and I share a fixed, adequate, and regular place to live? Now, if I'm living with her because I don't have a place to live, and let's say she doesn't have a lot of room in her house, and I'm on the floor on a mattress, that's not considered fixed or adequate. Yes, I'm happy to have that, but it's not considered having a home. If it's not enough room for your family, you're doubled up and you're all living in a bedroom, for instance. So in Fond du Lac, in the public school district, most of our students are in that kind of a situation. Their families are doubled up. If, for instance, they live because it's a cultural sort of support system, and we find this among the Hmong families sometimes, families do live together, that's considered, they're not considered homeless. That's how they choose to live, that's how their culture is, and so we don't consider those people homeless unless there's an economic hardship. So I can tell you that as of last Friday, there are 104 children that we consider homeless in the district, and there are 61 families affected. Some of those people are at the shelter over in Sophia Street. Some are in a hotel or a motel. But most of them are living with someone else. And you know, I know that people say, well, at least they have a place to stay. But when I think about having to ask somebody, is it okay if we use the refrigerator? Can we take a shower today? Can we use the washer and dryer to wash our clothes? That's no way to live for anybody. And so what we do in the school district is we try to identify those kids. The one way that we do that is when children are new to the school district, they fill out a form when they first come. It's called a residency form. And the first question is, are you living by yourself or are you living with somebody? If you're living with somebody else, is it because you don't have enough money, you are doubled up for a short time, there's some kind of a physical issue that you might have, like lead poisoning, or there's a flooding, you're an immigrant or you're a refugee. So those are the questions that we ask. Then what we do is we do it through the system, the school system. So our counselors, who, by the way, I have to tell you, I think are heroes, because they meet with the families and they say, look, we can at least help you with a couple of things. We can help you with transport your kids, because the McKinney-Vento law is all about educating children. That's the goal. We want kids in school. If they can graduate from school, from high school, they have a far greater chance of not repeating this homeless process. So that's our number one. We'll transport children. We provide tutors if they need a tutor. And I can tell you, and I'll tell you this a little bit later, but lots and lots of our children need tutors. We provide school supplies. And maybe most importantly is that our counselors connect with those families to say, here's what our community has to offer you. Because we've taken a lot of time to really put together a set of resources. So for instance, St. Vincent de Paul is on our list, Salvation Army, the Food Pantry, Care Inc. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so according to the law, at least we can give those resources to our families. The hard part is that so many people are coming into our community who are poor and who need to be doubled up or are homeless. And it's a big change. And when I first started this job, the numbers were probably in the 80s. And by the end of this year, it'll probably be about 160 children that we identify. The fact that we're already at 102 has me a little nervous, because that's about 25 more than we had at this time last year. The kinds of folks that we're seeing coming into the community will be no surprise to you. The new folks coming in are families of color. And it's changing the way our community looks, which I think is a very good thing. I think diversity is a really good thing. It's difficult when a lot of our families are coming from the south side of Chicago and Milwaukee. And some of those people who live in Chicago, their children, they haven't put their children in school because it's so dangerous. They're coming to Fond du Lac because this is a great community to raise your kids in. They hear about it, they've got people here that they know, and they come here. However, as you know, bringing in a whole different culture of people, we've got some issues that we have to face as a community and as a church and as a school district. And one of those happens to be the poverty that's coming in to our town. We have a number of elementary schools that are 90 to 95% free and reduced lunch. So those children, luckily, can get their lunches for nothing, or they're on a reduced pay scale. So probably 43% of all the children in the public school district are on free and reduced lunch, and it may even be more than that, but that's at least the minimum. So we've got people who are hungry, people who come without furniture or extra clothing. So we have a lot of needs, and I have to say, this community is a great place to come if you have a need, because we are a very generous community. There's a group of people called the E-Angels that if one of our counselors needs a pair of boots, for instance, the other day, Evans asked if we could put it out to the E-Angels. We needed 3 pairs of boots for some children. And within a day, those kids had those boots and they were new. So, I mean, it's not only individual, but it's groups as a whole. Getting back to the folks that are coming here. The poverty, I think, is something that we have to come to grips with as a community. And it's something that I've been here for 40 years. I haven't seen poverty like this. And yet, these are good people who have needs just like we do, who love their kids just as much as we love our kids. And so we need to kind of look at that piece and rally together. And I do think that as a community, we are doing that. The children that I see are behind in reading and math, woefully. And they usually are children of color. There are children, Caucasian children, who are also behind. But the children coming in are putting us to the test as a school district, in my opinion, because, it's all about testing, it's all about performance. And these are good children who have been raised in a different way. And so there's some challenges in our classrooms. And that's just the simple truth of it. Our teachers in all of our schools, and by the way, how lucky are we to have 3 school systems in this town to educate our kids. I think we are enormously lucky. And all of our teachers are doing what every teacher in this town does and working their very best. I'm so glad we have a food pantry because many of our families don't have the right amount of food. And lots of people ask, well, what should we do? Well, we can get food and clothing, but we can't get shelter. We've got a real issue here, and I know that St. Vincent de Paul and the Salvation Army and the Solution Center is really studying this. There isn't enough housing for our families here who are poor. And so a lot of times they have to leave here and they'll try Oshkosh or they'll try Sheboygan. There are a number of us who are looking at that problem. Diane Benson is with the city, and she's also looking at it from a governmental standpoint. The United Way is looking for it at the issue, but I'm not sure what we're going to do about this. And I would say to you that it's something that you could do by expressing your concern to the city to make sure that they know that you are aware. It's not that people don't want to do something, but buying something to house homeless people isn't an easy task, and it's an expensive task. We try to support our parents by getting furniture if they do get an apartment, by getting clothing for them. we do all of the things that probably the Human Concerns group at church does as well. I'm not sure just exactly, Erin, maybe you could tell me a little bit. Do you also support families that you are aware of? Is that what Human Concerns does?
So in Human Concerns, we have actually a grant that we are able to use to help support families from our parish. The grant is very specific that it has to be members of Holy Family. And so if there's people in need and they come to me, I am able then to use that grant money to help them. And it can be for rent, it could be for utilities, it can be for really whatever their needs are at any point. But they can come and get help every 6 months for me if they are in need or in Human Concerns.
And I also think that, there's some skill building that needs to be done in the community. And that's why I'm very much a fan of the programs that St. Vincent de Paul and Salvation Army have about trying to help the poor and trying to educate them about different kinds of things that will help them make better decisions in the future. So we happen to know that sometimes there are families who are renting and something goes wrong and they stop paying their rent. Well, that's never going to work. You have to establish communication with your landlord, for instance. That's a skill that a lot of people do not have. And so I like the fact that, these classes will help people learn that skill, because there are a lot of skills that people do not have when dealing with this kind of situation. And we also talk about, and I'm sure you've heard about it on radio and TV, but there's this set of experiences that some people have, and they're not positive. And so children will have what they call as an ACE score. And it's about experiences, for instance, maybe they've experienced divorce, maybe the death of somebody in their family, maybe incarceration of one of their family members. And those kinds of experiences in children reflect themselves by behavior. And as you grow up, that doesn't get any better unless you really practice learning a new skill to try to help you understand what your past, how your past is affecting your daily times today. So, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a mental illness piece, there's a poverty piece, there's a piece, this is how I've learned and this is all I know. And so all of that affects people's ability to establish a new life. And I think, this is my own personal opinion, and I know some people who've done this. They have said to another family, you can come and stay with us. Let me help you. Not give them everything that they need, but support them to get the things that they need. And I think that that's really important, not just to give things to folks, but to say in return, let's see what we can do with this so that you can learn how to do this on your own. Because I think responsibility is really an important issue here. I could probably go on, and I don't want to do that. I do want to say to you that it is an issue. Poverty and homelessness are an issue in this town. I would say support the groups that you believe in and that can support these ongoing issues, whether it's your church or your favorite nonprofit. There's a lot of them out there that you could support. When it comes to kids, if you want to join the E-Angel group, please let me know, because I'd send out an email once in a while, and I think Joyce is on it, and you get it, and it might say, feed coats today. Would you be willing to help with that? But more than that, I think we just need to accept the fact that things are changing in our community. And change is a good thing. It brings issues up, but we can solve those. But we have to know what exactly we're working toward. And from my standpoint, it's about getting people housed, helping people become responsible, educating their children, and making people safe. And I will say one other thing. There is a feeling among mothers of color, specifically African American moms. They are worried about their kids. They're worried about their kids walking to school. They really are. This is ingrained in them. We have numbers of kids that we bus, and we are happy to do that. If they're within 3 blocks, no, they don't get bused, of course not. But I can tell you, there is this real fear for the safety of their children. And that's why, you know, they're adamant, these moms are adamant about getting their kids to a safe school, wherever it is. So do you have any questions for me, any comments? It's a lot to digest, and I know you know all this, but, you know, Joyce.
One of the things that I was looking up yesterday had to deal with an article that was in, I think, the Action Advertiser that, or someplace, that Solution Center was looking for coats. So I called them, and I said, I thought the Salvation Army was the clearinghouse, but there are problems with that. So they are looking at coats because the Salvation Army does a registration. If somebody comes and they haven't met that in registration, they still need coats. And then I started looking further, and Family Resource Center had a little note saying that they were looking for size 6X snow pants, and somebody else had come in. So one of the things, when I called the Solution Center, I referenced you with the E-Angels in that, refer them not just to the Salvation Army, but refer them to you so that that message can get out. And I haven't talked to Family Resource Center, but those were 2 things that came up. And I don't know if the parents understand that going to the counselor at school would be really beneficial too.
We find that working through the counselor is really great because our counselors know these kids. And just as an example, let me talk about Chegwin for a minute. Chegwin is a remarkable school that supports its families and its kids like you cannot believe. They know every family there. They are bringing in advocate. They're bringing in, they have a police liaison officer that they have who's trained to help these kids. The custodial staff, the secretarial staff, everybody is geared toward helping parents. It is really quite a family-centered school, as others are, but I'm familiar with them because I'm working a lot with them. And I think part of the thing, too, is that there's many of us that are doing the same thing, and we're working to do a better job of coordinating. Like, there should be one place for coats, and that should be that. It makes perfect sense. So some of us are talking about that. We're a member of the COC, the Continuum of Care, which is a federal program, and it's designed to support homeless people and to do what we can to solve the homeless issue. So we're looking at all of those kinds of things because it should be simple. We should be able to just call and say, I need a 6X coat, and we should have a place to go. So for instance, at Riverside School, they have quite a big clothes closet, and I know they have jackets, so.
And iron is too, because
yes, you've done that.
I've started doing things there.
Yeah, and do you keep a clothes closet as well?
We do not have a clothes closet.
Okay, and I would say if you know families, then chances are we can get them something, or we can, but we need to do a better job of that. So that community collaboration on resources, because man, we've got resources in this town.
I will say sometimes I don't think organizations know what other organizations are doing either. Because we work with Care Inc. quite a bit at Holy Family, and actually Mary and I both take the phones for Care Inc. And it's funny because Advocate will call us and they'll say, "Can you help us?" I said, "Well, this organization actually can help you with that." So just everyone knowing what everyone else is doing also would be extremely helpful, I feel.
Well, I almost think we should set up a community fair,
yeah,
if you will.
Tell what they do.
I mean, honestly, and maybe we should do that. We could do it at Holy Family because you've got that great big area. I mean, to invite all community, helpers, because it would be pretty interesting. Yes.
Community Resource Directory online.
And this is interesting too because there are some resources, and supposedly 211, the United Way, has it. I always struggle finding my way through that, but yes, I think that's a good idea. And there are some resources out there. So, for instance, legal services out of Oshkosh. I put that in my folders for our families because if you can preempt eviction, if you can call legal services before you get evicted, you might get some support. So there's a lot of those kinds of things. We should maybe work together on that.
Fabulous.
I mean, just to set out so every single group could come. Yeah, all right. We got our work cut out for us. Yes, Mr. Harris.
Linda, I recognize that there's a huge social justice element to all this, but listening to your comments and seeing the facts and figures about this, one could easily come to the conclusion that we should be doing less rather than more for the betterment of our community. Could you address that, and not from the social justice, what's right and what's wrong, but from the practical aspect?
When I think about every community has, in our area, has access to the same kinds of things that people coming here do. The piece I think is important is the learning the new skills and the responsibility piece of people that have an opportunity to take advantage of the thing. What you're speaking to?
Well, if by offering more and offering fixes for the homeless, we're attracting more homeless to Fond du Lac, where is the value added for our community by doing that?
And I would say to you that every community, my counterparts in every other school district are seeing the same thing. They're seeing more people coming north, if you will. And I don't know if it's because we give so much. Because, for instance, forward services, and maybe you are all aware, I wasn't aware of forward services. They're contracted by the government to provide a whole raft of governmental assistance programs to people. So, for instance, you can go, and if you qualify, you can perhaps get rent, a month's rent, or a security deposit. You might get some support for 3 to 6 months. You might get, you'll get training for a job, for schooling. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can get from forward services. But that's available everywhere. So I don't think that Fond du Lac offers, I don't think we're any different in terms of what we're giving people. But what I do think we have a responsibility to do is to require something for those services. And because we're not helping anybody, in my opinion, by just giving them something continually. I agree with that. I guess you could say I'm a little Republican that way. But I do believe that if we're going to extend charity, then you need to ask for something in return that will help others eventually return that charity to somebody else, pay it forward. And that's where I think the sticky part of it is. I don't know, and I don't know this. I just know anecdotally that Sheboygan is getting more people. Oshkosh is getting more people. Green Bay is getting more people. We're all seeming to be getting people from places where life isn't very easy, or, and it's difficult, and they don't have as many resources to draw on. Now, we have lots of people leaving, too. We have people, I have a family of 5 children. Couldn't find a place to stay. They're back in Chicago, but that's not working. So, could we have done something for that family? Probably, but it would have meant taking them as a family, as the program I think at St. Vinny's does, and saying, look, here's some skills. You need to lead the skills.
Thing right there is to work up the skills with them.
Yep.
Because they don't know what's coming in. They've lived in situations where they don't know. I mean, it's been generations where there hasn't been the skills taught, and I think that's what's so important.
Yeah.
That's what I like about those programs.
Me too. And I think that, if we were to all get together, maybe that's something that as a community, we could start really emphasizing and pushing. There are some grants. For instance, the Solution Center has grants, and they help domestic violence victims. That's their #1 priority now. Their grants specify that you cannot ask anything of the people in the shelter suffering from domestic violence. You can't ask them for a thing. You can't ask them to attend a class. You can't ask them to get a job. You can't ask them it was said to me, and I agree with this, the other thing I think we need to do is we need to get on our representatives and we need to put some pressure on people to change those kinds of things. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to say, here's money, and when this runs out, I suppose you'll go someplace else and get more. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me. Yes.
You touched on walking them through the process and, and helping them through. I think teaching them is a huge step. I know when we get calls, sometimes they're just so overwhelmed, they can't even, they don't even know where to go. They're just, it's like they just got stuck. They're stuck.
Yes.
And I think when you sit down with them, you walk through with them steps, and you teach them, this is what you need to do when this happens, or you need to talk to your landlord, or you need to have that open communication when you have a problem, because they're willing to work with you before it comes to that eviction. Those kinds of things I think are sometimes missing. People don't. I think our social workers are overworked and they have too many cases, and they don't have the time to sometimes do those kinds of things. So
I don't know if you're familiar with the Women's Empowerment Group that's in town. It's been going on. Teresa Menting has started that program. And I think there were probably 12 women, I'm not sure how many women, have a mentor. The mentor is not there to give money to. The mentor is there to teach, to support, to be listened to listen to. And I honestly think that that's what we need to do with families. I don't think a system's going to change this. I don't think homeless or poverty is going to be changed. This is my own personal opinion based on living a long time. I think we have to say to one person, look, I'm here to support you by my wisdom, by my education, by me listening to you, by me saying that you should maybe try this or this. I don't know how, I just don't think the system is going to change this. I really don't. I just think it's going to be a person-to-person thing. But that's a lot of work to ask us to do that. It is. It's a lot. There are some people in this town that do that. And there's a member of this parish that I have just great regard for who has housed people and taken them in and been supportive. And I think that's, talk about walking your talk. That's what it is. It's walking your talk. And many of us do that in a number of ways that work for us. Not everybody can take a family and say, okay, look, I know we just did this, but how about if we think about it another way? So it's a toughie. There's no question about it. You had a comment.
You ended up going there. I was going to ask about the mentorship program, if there was something in the community that would, where people would be educated to take on a family and know all the resources. And okay, this is, we're going to walk through these steps and get you to the place where you have a job and you can have your own apartment and all these things.
Really, the St. Vincent program, what I like about it is it's very methodical. It supports families so they make dinner, and I mean, it's constant. I don't know how many sessions there are, but it's a really good idea. But if they could include other families in that, just to meet them. The biggest issue I think that I see is that people in the community we don't really understand it until we know somebody who's homeless or poor. I know when I worked at Monty Central, it was the after school, and their parents there were working 2 and 3 jobs and just eking out a living with nothing left over. So, that to me too is it's a political issue. So it doesn't take much to make a phone call. To say, what are we doing? What is Fond du Lac County doing? Or what is the state of Wisconsin doing about X, Y, or Z? I mean, it's a many-pronged kind of issue. But, you're starting by having a human concerns group at church. And that is a big deal. You want to know. Awareness is absolutely the most important thing. I think if you can spread the word that people who are poor are not bad people. We all are about 1 or 2 paychecks away from a dire circumstance, and you know that. I have a friend who had everything, and now has very little, because a shock. And I'm just there, but for the grace of God go I. So, I mean, it can really happen, and I think that's the other thing we have to remember. To your point, Tom, I think it's worth my looking into to find out really who's coming in and if we have more people coming in. And I can tell you this, housing, we don't have housing. We do not have a lot of housing. There are about 5 landlords that work to take low-income families. And I've gone to the landlord meetings. Those people want to be helpful, but sometimes they're lied to. And that doesn't sit well. It wouldn't sit well with me if I was lied to repeatedly. But that's a behavior that needs to be stopped. I'm sorry, I can jump on.
What is the homeless at the high school level?
Well, this is a problem. High schools notoriously do underreport because if you're a child, a teenager, you don't want to let somebody know that you're homeless. Right now we have about 12 students. But here's the saddest thing of all. We have some students that come through and the federal form says throwaway. That's a designation on a federal form, a throwaway student. A kid whose parents just say, get out. Now, children are, at the high school level, they're considered homeless if they leave because it's an intolerable parent-child situation. It may be that, who knows what it is. It might be drugs. It might be the child's just really struggling. And yes, it's a child, I get that, but the fact that the child can't stay at home still is a terrible thing. And that child is considered homeless because lots of kids couch surf. Oh, there's a lot of that going on at that school. Lots of that. Yes?
2 things. The St. Edmunds and Paul program you're talking about is called Getting Ahead. Hopefully they'll cover that next week when St. Benny's gives a presentation on the classroom program.
Great.
The other one is a little different twist. What you're saying is the busing they have to provide at the school district because parents are afraid for their children. And some of that may be justified. They probably have experiences of it here, not just where they come from. How do we address those issues?
Can I just back up to say that the primary reason that we transport students is to take away the barrier of no car, no parent being able to walk their kids to school. That's the primary issue. But anecdotally, that's what I hear moms say, is that they're worried about it. So here's what our schools do. Before we ever even offer transportation, we say, this is so great, you're 6 blocks from school, there are other children that live around. The expectation is your child will walk to school. And most parents are great about that. They want their kids to do what every other kid is doing. So busing it's an issue, but it's not by any stretch a terrible issue here. Most parents want their kids to do what the rest of the kids are doing. So it really, we have 3 children right now. And I was working on it right before I came. They live at the building on 92 Forest and Military. And the mom is trying to keep her job. So she gets the 3rd grader and the 5th grader up, and they get on the bus at 6:15. And these kids were being dropped off at Evans School at 7 o'clock. Nobody's there. So they're riding around twice. Those children need transportation. And we just became aware of that. There's nobody in Evans. The janitor might be there, the custodian. But those kids have a long way to go to Evans from 92 Forest. We're going to transport those kids to get them there because that's a barrier. That mom's trying to get to work, to have a job. And she works out in the industrial park. And God love her, she's getting her kids to school. Just not helping, they're tired. And so those are mostly the circumstances where transportation becomes an issue. So I didn't mean to mislead you in terms of the fear of it all, but there is an element in some families about the safety of their children. Well, thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate what you do as a church and as a community and as a committee. And I think we should get together and see what we can do. All right. And thank you so much, and happy Thanksgiving and Merry Christmas, and thanks again. And I'll be back if anybody wants to chat, absolutely. Thank you.